Welcome to the Get Real Movies podcast. My name is Daniel Chadwick Shubat. I'm your host, and today is another episode of the Independent Film Focus series. Today we will be talking about the movie Shook with its director Amar Wala. Shook focuses on a young man's experiences by the name of Ashish, who's played wonderfully by Samir Usmani, and is partially based on the director's own life experiences. So this feels like a deeply personal film, and it is one that I really wanted to talk to Amar about. I'm very excited, especially for Canadians to see this, because if you've ever been in the GTA, you will definitely recognize a lot of these landmarks, and it's not something that we see often in film. Toronto is usually used as New York or filming for another city. It rarely gets to play itself. So this is kind of one of those rare instances where we get to see one of our Canadian cities used as an actual Canadian city instead of some American city or somewhere else even. It is a lovely thing about Canada. All of its locations can be used for so many different places, but it's always nice when we get to see Canada as Canada in the movies. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you enjoy listening to it as well. And without much further ado, here's my conversation with Amar Wala. Oh, it is now my pleasure to bring onto the show the director of Shook, and that is Amar. Amar, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I think the first thing I'd love to ask you about this film is it kind of gave me a shock, no pun intended, how many landmarks I recognized. And I'm from Ottawa, but I'm driving through Toronto and the GTA all the time, and it was weird. This must be what a lot of Americans feel like when they're watching films in their hometowns, because I would see places and I'm like, I've driven past there. So how great was it to shoot in an area that you recognized and maybe you felt more at home at?
It wasn't something we thought about at all. It was just naturally what the film required. And so most of the locations are things that are pulled from my own memory. And yeah, it's amazing to me the kind of reaction that's getting. Everyone's really wants to talk about how the film is shot and the locations it's shot at. And I guess that's because it's so rare for Toronto to just be Toronto in a movie, right? So many times we see it all the time, and they change the street sign to try to pretend it was New York or something like that. And I was telling other people I wanted to evoke that feeling of oh, I've been to that coffee shop, or oh, I know that bar. I mean, just treat it as naturally as possible, because I feel like every other city gets that, but Canadian cities rarely do. So
they do. They rarely do. I totally agree. And I mean, the amount of times I've had Americans struggle to say Etobicoke, which is fair because it is a tough name to say. And I think the most important thing to talk about is the film itself. And I truly did enjoy it. I found a lot of my upbringing and a lot of the way I grew up in it. And maybe it was more personal to me than it would be to some, because I am a Canadian and a Canadian immigrant. And it brings up a lot of the things that I love about Canada. So I'd love for you to talk, especially Ashish and his family and that whole dynamic, because we're introduced to them and there's a bit of a broken family dynamic at the start. And I really loved watching the characters interact, especially Ashish and his father, Vijay, and his mother as well. I love the family dynamic.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think the goal was, first off, the film is very personal and it touches on a lot of real family dynamics that kind of took place in my 20s, where my dad really was diagnosed with Parkinson's not long after my parents' marriage ended. So it was a tricky time in my life, but I also felt like it's the kind of thing that you rarely see South Asian families deal with in Western cinema, right? Especially parents, the depiction of South Asian parents in American and, to a certain extent, even Canadian movies is often very one-dimensional as the strict parent that wants their kid to be an engineer and wants to matchmake their son, that kind of stuff. So some of that is obviously very real, but Indian parents are like anything else. They're not a monolith. There's all kinds of parents. And my parents were creative, smart, loving people who kind of had all kinds of flaws and messiness. And I felt it was the kind of thing that doesn't get explored enough. So it was almost like a privilege to just kind of touch on what my family went through as a way to kind of break some of those notions of what a South Asian family is actually like, right? And then, for the relationship between the characters, I really have to give a lot of that credit to the actors themselves. Samir Usmani plays, a lot of people will recognize him from Three Body Problem and Succession and things like that. But this is his first feature lead role. And really, he's in every scene of the movie, and he really carries the movie, which is not an easy thing to do, right? Like it takes a very special actor to be able to carry a load like that. And so he's really the one kind of setting the tone for us in terms of like relationships with the other characters and things like that. And yeah, it was just wonderful. And I think it was for Pamela, who plays the mom, and Bernard, who plays the dad. I think it was really nice for them because they often play Indian parents, right? So it was nice for them to play parents that are complex, that are kind of messy, that have their own dreams and desires, that have a sexuality, all of that kind of stuff, which seems really simple. And I think a lot of sort of like non-racialized filmmakers get to take for granted. Um, it's something that we don't get to do very often. So it was kind of nice.
It definitely was a different look on a South Asian family that I've seen before, and I do love Bernard White. I think he really stole the show and stole some of the scenes. But I do completely agree that some of the scenes with the parents where they're just swearing along with their kids and they're like, stop going on at me about living my life. It was very comedic to watch, and I ended up laughing a lot more than I thought I would in a movie about someone whose dad gets diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I think that kind of brings a humanity to the disease that affects many people's lives. I have a few family members with Parkinson's, and every year I have a charity golf tournament that I raise money for Parkinson's Canada. So this was something that was quite close to me as well.
Well, thank you for that. That's incredible. Parkinson's Canada is going to screen the film, and yeah, they're kind of, I guess you could say, like partners in a way on the project now. So yeah, that means a lot to me. And yeah, I'm sorry to hear about your family members, but that's amazing. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, well, and I think this film is really amazing in showcasing that, a lot of people, there's still a very good, promising life to be lived, and there's so many different things they're finding out about the disease, and there's so many strides they're taking. And I know the film doesn't go too much into that, but it does really have a beautiful portrayal of it, and how it's difficult not only for the people living with it but also for their family members, and seeing that. And I think Samir really showcases that well, and you mentioned he's in almost every scene of the movie, and you really get to experience those emotions with him at the same time, which is really a testament to him. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about his role and how you maybe talked about this, because it's based on a lot of your life experience, and what sort of conversations that the two of you have about it.
I think by the time Samar came on board, like I had enough distance from the story and from the script itself that it felt like a character, and it no longer felt like just my story. And I really wanted them to tackle it as artists, as actors, as they would any kind of role. I think what Samar was drawn to was, even as an actor as successful as him, he perhaps doesn't get like feature lead offers like this too often, right? It's a pretty difficult sort of road out there for South Asian performers. And so I really wanted to give him the chance to just kind of run with it and make it his own thing, and really make it an artistic collaboration. And so, we didn't talk about it too much, but I just made it clear very early in the process that like it's his role, and he doesn't have to stick to or adhere to anything that I may have, any kind of notions that I may have about what I want the character to be. And really, I mean, the role is a difficult one because, obviously there's a lot of jokes made about like the character being good looking and all of that stuff. And Samar has those like classic leading man type of looks and all of that stuff. But the role is funny and emotional and like physical in a way that like really it takes a special performer to pull that off. And so I think my biggest challenge was casting the right person. And like, we're so lucky that Samar ended up saying yes to this, because I can't imagine the movie without him now. And I can't imagine Ash as anyone but him, right? Whereas before, maybe it could have been a number of different people, but he really took it and ran with it in a way that even I couldn't foresee.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk about another part of the movie, and that is the love story between Ashish and Claire, the barista. I really love how that love story came to be, and how it was sort of planned on Claire's side but not on his side, and how it really is kind of strung through the movie, and connects sort of all the dots until the very end, which I won't spoil for anyone. So I'd love to talk about how that became a part of the film, and how was it working with Amy Forsyth as well, and seeing those two and their amazing chemistry.
It was one of the more fun parts of the whole process in terms of writing that relationship, right? Because obviously the family stuff was very personal to me, and this was, I guess you could say, a chance to really push creative boundaries and kind of have fun with this relationship within the movie. The premise of it was that, I had in my younger years met somebody at the beginning of a summer that I knew was moving away at the end of a summer, right? So it was that question all summer of like, how deep do you want to go? How much do you want to dive in here? Because they're going to move on. And so I always thought that that was an interesting paradox to have for characters. Like, how much do we want to fall for each other if we know we're going to be going in our separate directions? So that felt like an interesting kind of like way to start their relationship. And then really with Claire, we wanted to make her funny and confident and in many ways kind of like an antithesis to Ashish, who's a little bit like more subdued and more quiet and kind of gets by on his charm and his looks, right? So, but like Amy brought so much charm and so much humor and just like so much warmth to that character. Like the way the movie starts is actually like it's a bit of a dangerous start, right? Because like you've got this white girl who's essentially flirting with a brown guy by poking at his name a little bit, right? So we're taking almost like a bit of a subversive approach to the beginning of that humor. We're twisting that on its head a little bit, which, later on you find out she kind of knew what she was doing, but it could be, if people take that the wrong way, it could be pretty cringy, right? So it was a really difficult balance to hit in terms of tone. And I felt like she hit it perfectly. It's such a special opening scene. And yeah, honestly, the chemistry between them is crazy. Like it's crazy. Even on set, it was crazy. They became really good friends. They're super close now. They both lived in New York and, when we cast them, I'd cast them both over Zoom and they had never met and they got together and met in New York after the casting. And I think they just hit it off right away as friends and brought that over to Toronto. And it really set a tone for a lot of the, because they were both, apart from being really supportive of each other, really supportive of the crew, really supportive of me. And it created this like warmth that just kind of permeated through the whole set.
Well, that's wonderful. And I really enjoyed it. And I don't think it was cringe at all. It was just the right amount of cringe where you're like, oh, this is very relatable. And
Perfect.
I
I'm
think
glad
many
you're saying
people
that.
can relate to the sort of summer fling that you have where people are leaving at the end of the summer and like you said, it's how deep are you supposed to go? So I think that was very relatable. I know we only have another minute or two, so I'd love to ask, are there any films sort of that inspired you when you were making this film or just inspire you in general? Because I know this is your first feature, and I hope it's the first of many, but were there any films that sort of inspired you before the making of this film?
I think in terms of the writing of it, it just kind of came out. And I guess my entire sort of like life of watching movies all inspired the tone of the movie in some way. But then when I kind of sat down to think about it after when we were pitching the film, really trying to find tonal references, there were a few sort of like older and newer films that kind of like all I realized had seeped their way into my brain at some point, right? So one I always bring up is Good Will Hunting, which obviously is a very different movie and has a very different sort of aesthetic and vibe. But really what I realized was that what Matt Damon's character is going through there, being from South Boston, having his boys, having his friend group that's really close, and then having to connect with this world of professors in Harvard and this sort of like wealthy side of Boston is pretty similar to what Ash is kind of struggling with in Toronto, right? In terms of his relationship with the city. But also, in Good Will Hunting, he meets a girl who's moving away later, right? Like there's a lot of those similar themes. And like we didn't intend it this way. But we realized, like, at a certain point in the draft, we're like, oh man, there's a lot of like weird, similar themes to Good Will Hunting in the movie, which is why I don't know if you caught the reference, but at the end of the movie, he says that line to his mom. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to spoil it, but he says a line to his mom that is a direct line from Good Will Hunting, right?
Mhm.
Which makes perfect sense in the scene, and you won't get that it's a reference. But I think
I didn't catch it until now.
yeah, we wanted to kind of like twist that and make it funny, which is, I'm glad it's funny because in Good Will Hunting, it's a very serious moment. But like that was a big one. And then just in terms of making something that was really personal, but really specific to my family and my culture and my community, The Farewell was a big influence on us because it had come out just a few years. It came out kind of, I think, right as we were writing, maybe, or beginning to write the script. The confidence of that film, the way it connected so deeply by being so specific, the way the language issues proved not to be an issue for an audience. I'm sure they were an issue when they were trying to fund that movie, but it just kind of proved for us. It gave us a lot of confidence that if we be specific and we be honest and we dive right in, that it's the kind of thing that does resonate with a broader audience. So that was a huge confidence booster for us.
Well, thank you so much, Amar, for spending the time with us today. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and thank you for the film as well. And I wish you all the luck.
Thank you. It means a lot that you liked it. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much to Amar for coming on. I really enjoyed chatting with him about Shook, a truly Canadian film and something that was quite close to my heart, having some family members with Parkinson's, as I mentioned in the interview. And I really do implore people, if it's in limited theaters around them, if they catch it on VOD or even on TV, to give it a watch, because it is really a truly wonderful film and a small independent film as well, which is why I love focusing on independent films in this series here and chatting to filmmakers and actors behind them. As I mentioned in the last episode, our next episode will be Anthony Robles talking about Unstoppable, which is something I'm very excited to show you guys, because it was a wonderful conversation with Anthony. He was really gracious with his time, and I think you guys will enjoy that episode as well. And then, as I mentioned, many exciting things coming up. So thank you so much for listening. Please leave a comment on Spotify, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate it. Leave us any feedback on social media as well at Get Real Movies. And until next time, we'll see you at the movies. Bye, y'all.